New York never really slept, it just changed masks. Daylight wore ambition, night wore sin. And in the shadows where light dared not go, a man named Darth Vader ruled an empire built on blood, loyalty, and silence. They called him the Ghost King. Not because he was unseen, but because when he appeared, someone vanished. He didn't believe in mercy. He didn't believe in love. Until the night he met Nina Hart. Nina was 27, quiet, soft-spoken, and hopelessly good. She taught literature at a small public high school in Brooklyn. Shakespeare by day, dreams by night. Her life was gentle routine: morning coffee, chalk dust, the laughter of children, the same walk home past the corner florist. She believed the world could be kind if you looked hard enough. That belief would soon break. It was late October when the city turned cold. Nina stayed after school to grade papers, humming under the flicker of a dying fluorescent light. Outside, engines roared. A black convoy tearing through the rain-slicked streets. Darth was inside one of those cars, staring out the tinted window. His driver spoke softly. "The meeting's at the docks. The Italians say they want peace." "Peace," Darth murmured. "Everyone says that before they start shooting." As the convoy slowed at a red light, he noticed her. A woman in a tan coat, umbrella broken, books clutched to her chest, hurrying through the storm. Something in that fleeting image, the innocence, the stubborn humanity, made him pause. "Stop," he ordered. "Boss," I said. "Stop." The driver obeyed. The first look, the car door opened. Darth stepped out, tall, sharp-featured, wrapped in black. Rain kissed his hair, slid down the scar that cut across his jaw. He walked toward her. Nina froze, startled by the stranger emerging from a luxury car in the middle of a storm. "Need help?" he asked, voice low, almost gentle. She blinked rain from her lashes. "No, thank you. Just bad umbrella luck." He took the umbrella from her trembling hands and held it over her instead. "Then you can borrow mine." She hesitated. "You don't even know me." "I know you're getting soaked." For the first time in years, Darth smiled. A small, dangerous thing that almost looked human. He walked her to the subway entrance. When they reached the stairs, she turned to him. "Thank you, Mr. Vader," he said. "Darth Vader." She laughed softly. "Like Star Wars, something like that?" "And you are?" he asked. "Nina Hart. I teach at Jefferson High." Her voice had warmth, the kind he'd forgotten existed. "Well, Miss Hart," he said, "the city's a cruel place for kind people. Be careful who you trust." She tilted her head. "That sounds like experience talking." "Too much of it." Then he turned, disappeared back into the night. She watched him go, shivering, not from the cold, but from the strange electricity that lingered in the air. For days, Nina couldn't get him out of her mind. There was something about that man, his eyes, his calm danger, that both frightened and fascinated her. She found herself scanning the streets when she walked home, half hoping to see him again. She didn't know that Darth had already found her. From the shadows, he watched her classroom through a tinted car window unseen. Rico, his right-hand man, frowned. "Boss, why are we watching a teacher?" Darth didn't answer. He just whispered, "She doesn't belong in this city." Rico smirked. "Neither do we." It happened a week later. Nina's evening bus broke down near the Lower East Side, the kind of neighborhood where good people shouldn't walk alone. She decided to cut through an alley toward the next station. Halfway through, two men stepped out from the dark. "Hey, sweetheart," one slurred. "You lost." She clutched her bag. "Please, I don't want trouble." The taller one laughed. Too late for that. Before they could touch her, a voice cut through the rain. "Let her go." Darth stepped from the shadows, coat flowing behind him like smoke. The men turned. "Who the hell are?" They never finished the sentence. Two quick movements. A flash of silver, a groan, and both were on the ground, clutching broken ribs. Nina stared frozen. "You again." He looked at her, expression unreadable. "I told you this city eats kind people. You followed me. Protected you. Why?" He hesitated, then said quietly, "Because you looked at me like I wasn't a monster." The invitation. He walked her home. Silent except for the rain. When they reached her apartment door, she turned. "I don't even know who you really are." "You don't want to," he said. "But I do." He studied her face. That innocent curiosity that felt like sunlight in a place that only knew shadow. Finally, he said, "Tomorrow, 7 p.m. Café Marcel. If you show up, I'll tell you something real. If you don't, forget I exist." She nodded slowly. "Okay. When she went inside, her heart was a storm of confusion. Fear, excitement, and a feeling she couldn't name. Café Marcel. The next evening she came. He was already there, sitting in the back corner, black suit, gloves off, a small scar catching the candlelight. "You came," he said. "I shouldn't have," she whispered. "But you did." They talked for hours. About literature, music, and why he hated New York's skyline. He told her pieces of truth wrapped in lies, that he ran a family business, that he'd lost too many people, that sometimes he wished he could start over. When she laughed at one of his dry jokes, he felt something shift inside him. Something dangerously close to peace. As they left, a black car waited at the curb. Rico leaned out the window. "Boss, we got a problem. The Russians hit our Queen's warehouse." Nina frowned. "Boss?" Darth turned to her, tone changing. "Go home, Nina. Lock your doors." "What's going on?" "Nothing that concerns you." She caught his arm. "You can't just disappear again." He looked down at her hand on his sleeve, fragile, trusting, alive, and something inside him cracked. He said softly, "If you knew who I really was, you'd run." "Maybe I wouldn't." For a heartbeat, they just stood there, two worlds about to collide. Then he stepped back into the car, the door slammed, and the night swallowed him whole. From that day, Nina's life changed. Strange cars appeared near her building. Men she didn't know watched her from across the street. Her phone rang at odd hours. Silence on the other end. And sometimes, when she looked out her window, she saw a figure in the rain, tall and black, watching but never approaching. She told herself it was all in her mind. It wasn't. Darth was watching, not out of obsession but fear. He knew enemies would use her to hurt him. And for reasons he didn't yet understand, the thought of losing her terrified him more than death itself. One night, he received a message from the Russians. "You have a weakness, Vader. A teacher with a soft heart. Will teach her how cruel the world can be." That was the first time Darth's mask truly cracked. He stared at the message, and for the first time in years, his hands trembled. Rico saw it. "Boss, what do we do?" Darth's voice was a whisper from hell. "We remind them what fear really means." And with that order, the storm that would consume both their lives began to gather. Nina Hart, the gentle teacher, had unknowingly stepped into the orbit of New York's most dangerous man. And Darth Vader, who thought he'd buried his heart long ago, had just found the one person who could make him feel again. Neither of them knew that love, in his world, always demanded blood. It had been 6 days since Nina last saw Darth Vader. 6 days of restless sleep, unanswered questions, and that haunting image of his face under the city lights. She told herself to forget him. She tried. Lesson plans, grading papers, late-night tea, nothing helped. Every time thunder rolled outside, she half expected his black car to appear beneath her window. And then one night it did. Her phone rang once. Unknown number. When she answered, the voice was deep and calm. Café Marcel. 1 hour. Come alone. She stood in her apartment trembling, torn between reason and something far stronger. In the end, she didn't even grab her umbrella. Café Marcel was empty at that hour, save for the storm outside and a man sitting in the farthest booth. Darth looked the same, composed, sharp, eyes darker than the rain behind him. "You came," he said. "You didn't give me much choice," she replied, trying to sound braver than she felt. He smiled faintly. "There's always a choice, Miss Hart. You made yours." He gestured to the seat. She sat. The tension between them was alive, quiet, dangerous, magnetic. After a long silence she asked, "Why me, Darth? You don't seem like the kind of man who rescues strangers." He leaned back. "You remind me of something I lost a long time ago." "What was that?" "Peace." He slid a black envelope across the table. "Inside is an address," he said. "Come tomorrow night. If you want to know who I really am, that's where you'll find your answers." She looked down at the envelope, then back at him. "And if I don't come?" He shrugged. "Then I'll disappear." "For good." Her pulse quickened. "Why do I feel like you're dangerous?" He smiled, slow, knowing. "Because I am." The address led her to the outskirts of the city, an estate hidden behind iron gates, guarded by men in suits. She almost turned back, but curiosity and something she couldn't name pulled her forward. A guard opened the gate without a word. "Miss Hart, he's expecting you." The mansion rose before her like something out of another century. Black stone, golden light spilling from tall windows, thunder rolling overhead. Inside, the air smelled of cedar and secrets. He met her in the grand hall, dressed in black as always, no tie, sleeves rolled up, eyes softened. Not quite the monster the city feared. "Welcome to my world," he said quietly. He showed her through rooms that felt more like kingdoms. Walls lined with art, ancient weapons, and silence. Men nodded as he passed, loyal, wary, respectful. In his office, the skyline stretched behind him like a crown of fire. "This is what I built," he said. "What I protect. What owns me." She turned slowly, taking it in. "You said you run a family business." He gave a small, cold laugh. "Family, yes. Business." He poured a drink. "Depends on who's asking." She looked at him, unflinching. "Then I'll ask plainly. Are you in the mafia?" He set the glass down, eyes meeting hers. "Yes." The word hung in the air like a loaded gun. She should have left then. Every instinct screamed that this was wrong. That the man standing before her was carved from danger itself. But there was something in his honesty, in the exhaustion behind his confidence, that drew her closer. "You're not afraid?" he asked quietly. "I am," she said. "But I think fear isn't always a reason to run." He stepped closer, close enough for her to feel the warmth of his breath. "Then what is it?" "A reason to understand." Their eyes locked, her innocence against his darkness. Something unspoken passed between them, heavier than words. He insisted she stay for dinner. A long mahogany table, silver candles, the soft sound of rain. They spoke, carefully at first. He told her of his childhood in the Bronx, of a father who drank too much and debts that turned into violence. How, at 16, he killed a man to save his mother. How the streets crowned him long before he knew what power meant. "I never wanted to rule," he said, his voice low. "I just wanted control. The city gives you one or the other, never both." Anina listened, quiet, her heart aching. "You could still walk away," she said. "You're alive. That means you can still choose." He looked at her as though she'd said something naive, yet beautiful. "If I walk away, 100 men die to take my place. Then let them." "You think I'm afraid of death?" "No," she whispered. "I think you're afraid of living without purpose." He stared at her, stunned by the truth in her words. And in that silence, something dangerous began to bloom. Later, he showed her the balcony overlooking the river. The city lights shimmered below, reflections twisting on black water. "Sometimes," he said, "I stand here and think about what it would be like to disappear. Change my name. Start over somewhere warm. Then why don't you?" He looked at her. Really looked. "Because this city has my blood. And you can't run from what's inside you." She stepped beside him. "Maybe you just need a reason to try." He smiled softly. "And what if that reason is you?" Her heart stuttered. She didn't know how to answer. He reached out. Just a touch, fingers brushing her cheek. Then pulled away, as though afraid the moment itself was too dangerous to exist. When she left that night, he handed her a small box. "Consider it protection," he said. Inside was a delicate gold locket shaped like a rose. "Wear it," he told her. "No matter what happens." She looked up at him. "Is this some kind of tracker?" He smirked. "It's a promise." Over the next few weeks their worlds intertwined. He'd appear at her classroom gate after dark, just to walk her home. Sometimes he'd send flowers to the school, always black roses, always unsigned. She told herself it wasn't love. But every time his voice slipped into her dreams, she stopped believing herself. Meanwhile, whispers spread through the underworld that the great Darth Vader had a weakness. A woman with gentle eyes and a heart too pure for his world. And when the enemies of a king find his heart, they don't aim for the throne, they aim for her. One night, Rico came to him. "Boss, the Russians are watching the school. They know about her." Darth froze. "How?" "Doesn't matter. They're waiting for you to slip." He clenched his jaw. "Then we move her." Rico frowned. "You can't just kidnap a teacher, boss." "I can if it keeps her alive." He looked out the window. The city glittering like a battlefield waiting for dawn. For the first time in his life, fear didn't come from bullets or betrayal. It came from love. The line between safety and danger was gone. Nina had stepped fully into Darth's world. A world that would either protect her or destroy her. And Darth, who had ruled a city without mercy, now had a weakness worth dying for. The storm had begun, and love in his hands was both weapon and wound. Nina woke to pounding on her door. 3 sharp knocks, followed by silence. When she opened it, Darth stood there in his black coat, rain dripping from his hair. "We're leaving?" he said. "What now?" It's 3 in the morning. They found you, Nina? The Russians? Her blood ran cold. He stepped inside, glancing around the small apartment. The worn couch, the books stacked by the window, the soft pastel walls. It was a world too innocent for his touch. I didn't want this, he said quietly. But they've made their move. Darth, I can't just disappear. My job, my students. He turned to her, eyes dark with something between rage and fear. Do you think they care about your students? You're my weakness. That makes you their target. Pack your things. And just like that, her life as Nina Hart, the school teacher, ended. The safe house was nothing like she expected. A glass penthouse overlooking Manhattan, elegant and cold. Guards at the entrance, cameras hidden in every corner, luxury draped over tension. She walked through the rooms like a ghost, tracing her fingers over marble counters and crystal vases, wondering what it meant to be protected by a man everyone else feared. Darth watched her silently. You'll be safe here. No one gets past my men. She turned to him. I don't want safety if it means being a prisoner. He stepped closer, his voice low. You're not my prisoner, Nina. You're the only thing I'm trying to keep alive. The words broke something inside her. Because she believed him. Even though every instinct said she shouldn't, that night she couldn't sleep. The city below glittered like a trap. Beautiful, merciless. She walked out to the balcony, wearing his oversized shirt he'd left draped on a chair. The scent of his cologne clung to the fabric, smoke, leather, and something untamed. Behind her, the sound of footsteps. You should rest, he said. She turned. You should stop giving orders. A flicker of surprise. Then a smile. You're the only one who can say that and live. She walked up to him unafraid. Why me, Darth? You could have anyone. Women who understand your world. Why risk everything for someone like me? He looked at her for a long moment, the city lights reflecting in his eyes. Because you make me want to be the man I should have been. She exhaled, heart trembling. And who's that? Someone who deserves you. The space between them disappeared, not with hunger but with inevitability. When his lips met hers, it wasn't the kiss of a gangster. It was the kiss of a man who'd forgotten how to feel until her. Nina woke to sunlight spilling across silk sheets. For a moment, it felt like peace, warm, quiet, almost ordinary. Then she noticed the gun on the nightstand. Reality hit her like a slap. When she found Darth in the kitchen, he was already in his black suit, phone pressed to his ear, voice hard. If they touch her, burn their docks. No survivors. He ended the call, eyes softening when he saw her. Morning, Angel. Angel, she asked with a smile. He smirked. If I start calling you trouble, you'll know I'm in love. Then maybe you already are, she said softly. His silence was her answer. Later that day, he took her to his headquarters. A warehouse disguised as a shipping company. Men in black suits stood like shadows as he walked past, their respect palpable. This is what I control, he told her. But control is an illusion. Power only lasts until someone hungrier takes it. She watched as he handled a deal. Calm, commanding, terrifyingly precise. The men around him feared him, yet followed with devotion. When they left, she said quietly, You're not just powerful, Darth. You're lonely. He looked at her, startled, as though she'd seen through his armor. Lonely men are dangerous, she added. So are women who see too much, he replied. But there was no anger in his tone, only admiration. The enemy moves that night. Rico burst in with news. Boss, they hit one of our trucks. It's a message. Darth's eyes darkened. Who's doing? Petrov's men. They want blood. Nina froze. Petrov? Rico nodded. Russian syndicate. They've been waiting for a weakness. Darth stood, fists clenched. Then they found one. He turned to Nina. You stay here. No arguments, no wandering. She stepped forward. Darth, I said no. The sharpness in his tone made her flinch. His anger wasn't at her. It was at the fear of losing her. When he left, she stood by the window watching the city below, knowing that the man she loved was walking into blood. The next night, the war began. Gunfire lit up the docks like fireworks. Darth's men fought like wolves, ruthless and silent. Petrov's message was clear: we know your heart. We'll use it against you. When Darth returned hours later, his knuckles were split, his shirt stained with blood. Nina ran to him, but he stopped her with a raised hand. Don't, he said quietly. You don't need to see this side. I already have, she whispered, reaching for him anyway. He finally let her touch him. and for a moment, the world stilled. "You think you can love a monster?" he asked. She looked into his eyes. "Only if the monster still has a heart." He laughed softly, a sound full of sorrow. "Then be careful, Nina, because if you find it, the world will take it from you." A week later, he surprised her with a small garden terrace above the penthouse. Fresh soil, white lilies, and sunlight. Her little heaven in his hell. "I wanted to give you something beautiful," he said, "something untouched by all this." She smiled. "You just gave me a reason to hope." He touched her cheek. "Hope is dangerous here. Then teach me how to survive it." He looked at her, really looked, and in that instant, Darth Vader realized something he never wanted to admit. He wasn't protecting Nina anymore. He was depending on her, and that made her the most powerful person in his world. The whisper of betrayal, but power breeds envy. Somewhere in the city, a man watched through a camera feed. A former ally, a traitor named Marco De Luca. He smirked as he watched Darth and Nina together. "Every king bleeds eventually," Marco said, "and I just found where to cut." A love had turned into a lifeline. But in the shadows, enemies were gathering, ready to strike at the one thing Darth Vader could not replace, Nina Hart. The storm was no longer coming. It had already arrived. For a brief moment, life felt normal again. The sun painted the skyline gold. The lilies on the terrace bloomed, and Nina began to smile without fear. Darth would leave in the mornings, his black car disappearing into the streets, and every evening he'd return with that same quiet strength. Sometimes bruised, sometimes smiling, but always hers. He'd begun reading her favorite book, Wuthering Heights, just to understand what romance meant to someone unbroken. She teased him about it, he said nothing, only smirked and kissed her. But behind the walls, the city was whispering. Enemies were closing in, and the name Marco De Luca had started to echo in the shadows. Marco had once been Darth's right-hand man, sharp, loyal, until greed consumed him. When Darth refused to let Marco run drugs through schools, he turned traitor. Now, Marco was back, and he wasn't after the Empire. He was after Darth's heart. He had spies, cameras, contacts, one of them deep inside Darth's own ranks. A man who smiled too easily, who listened too well. Rico. That evening, as rain poured over Manhattan, Darth returned home earlier than usual. His face was grim. "Nina," he said quietly, "pack your things." She froze. "Again, there's talk. Someone's watching us. I don't trust my men anymore." She saw the exhaustion in his eyes, the kind that came not from battle, but from betrayal. "Who?" she asked. "I don't know yet. But when I find out, they'll wish they never breathed." To keep appearances normal, Darth attended a dinner that night with his key men, including Rico. Nina begged him not to go. "Please," she whispered. "You said it yourself. You don't trust them." You brushed her cheek. "I have to. Power only survives if you show no fear." At the restaurant, a dimly lit Italian lounge on 45th Street, wine flowed, laughter echoed, and lies filled the air. Rico toasted to loyalty. Darth's glass never touched his lips. When he returned home, Nina was waiting, trembling. He pulled her into his arms. "It's okay," he murmured. "I'm here." But deep inside, he knew something had already changed. 3 nights later, the penthouse alarms blared. Gunfire, shouting, glass shattering. Darth grabbed his gun and pulled Nina behind him. Men stormed in, black masks, silenced weapons, professional. He moved like a shadow, precise, lethal, unstoppable. Bodies fell before they reached her. But as the smoke cleared, Rico stepped out from behind a column, a gun raised. "Boss," he said softly, "I told you. She'd be your downfall." Nina gasped. "Rico." Darth's face hardened. "You were like a brother." Rico smiled bitterly. "And brothers get tired of living in someone's shadow." He pulled the trigger. But Darth was faster. The bullet caught Rico in the shoulder. He fell, groaning, as Darth approached slowly, eyes filled with fire. "Tell me who paid you," Darth growled. Rico laughed, blood spilling between his teeth. "You already know." "Marco." Rico's grin widened. "He wants her. Says you don't deserve her." Darth's world went silent. He fired one last shot, clean, cold, final. Nina was shaking, covered in glass and fear. "We have to leave," Darth said. Now, she stared at him, the man who just killed his own friend. Her heart ached. But there was no time for tears. Within an hour they were gone, driving through the storm, deeper into the countryside, away from the glittering city that had turned on them. The new hideout was an old farmhouse surrounded by pines. No cameras, no guards, Just the sound of rain and their own breathing. For the first time in weeks, Darth seemed human again. He cooked. He laughed. He even tried to fix the leaky roof badly. At night, they'd sit by the fire, wrapped in silence. Nina traced the scars on his hands and asked, "Do you ever regret it? The life you chose?" He stared into the flames. "Every day." "Then leave it. Let it burn," he smiled sadly. "You can't unmake a monster, Nina. You can only teach it how to love." The next morning, Nina woke to find the garden outside filled with crimson roses. Hundreds of them, blooming overnight. She ran to him, laughing. "How did you?" He smiled. "I called in a favor. I wanted you to wake up to something alive." She threw her arms around him. "You're impossible." He kissed her forehead. "No, just hopelessly yours." For that single day, life felt perfect. But perfection is always the silence before tragedy. That night, a car stopped at the edge of the woods. A single envelope was dropped at the gate. Inside, a photo of Nina, taken from the night of the attack. And below it, a note in red ink: "You can't hide what I own. Marco." Darth's jaw tightened. "He's getting closer." Nina grabbed his hand. "Then let's run. Let's disappear." He looked at her, eyes dark as storm clouds. "If I run, he wins. If I fight, he dies." "Then fight for us." He kissed her hand. "Always." Days later, under a full red moon, Darth's men found Marco's hideout, a warehouse near the docks. Nina begged him not to go, but he was already gone. The gunfire that night could be heard for miles. It was said the river ran red, that Marco's empire fell in one bloody storm. When Darth returned at dawn, he was wounded, his shirt soaked with blood. "It's done," he whispered. Nina caught him before he fell. He smiled faintly. "I told you no one takes what's mine." She pressed her forehead to his. "You're not a monster, Darth. You're just broken. Then stay," he whispered, eyes fluttering, "until I'm whole again." The battle was over, but the price had only begun. Marco was gone, but death never leaves quietly. For every enemy Darth buried, another waited in the dark, and Nina, caught in the crossfire of love and vengeance, had just learned the first truth of his world: every rose grows from blood. For 2 weeks, Darth lay in the farmhouse bed, half conscious and feverish. Nina tended to him day and night, cleaning wounds, changing bandages, whispering prayers to a god she hadn't spoken to in years. Sometimes he'd wake screaming, not from pain, but from memories, names, cries. The sound of a gunshot that seemed to echo through his dreams. When the fever broke, he opened his eyes to find Nina asleep beside him, her head resting on his chest. He touched her hair gently. "You stayed." She stirred and smiled weakly. "I told you I would. Even after all this. I don't love the world you come from," she said softly. "I love the man who's trying to leave it." Whose throat tightened. If only she knew the whole truth. That the world wasn't chasing him, it belonged to him. 3 nights later, a stranger appeared at the farmhouse door. An old man in a soaked coat, his eyes sharp despite his age. Darth froze when he saw him. "Go back to the city," he said coldly. The man smirked. "That's no way to greet your uncle." Nina blinked, confused. "Uncle?" The man stepped forward. "You must be the reason my nephew has gone soft." "Leave her out of this," Darth said. But the man wasn't there to threaten. He was there to remind. "You can't hide forever, boy," the uncle said. "Your father's sins don't die in the woods." He dropped a small black envelope on the table and left without another word. Inside the envelope was a single photograph. A child, maybe 6 years old, standing beside a woman in a red dress. The woman's face was circled in ink. On the back, a single line: "She's not who you think she is." The name in the photo. Nina looked at the picture, confused. "Who is she?" Darth stared at the image, his face pale. "My mother. And the boy." "Me?" She frowned. "Then what does the message mean?" He said nothing, just stood and walked outside, rain falling hard against his shoulders. That night, Darth finally told her. About the Bronx. About how his father was a small-time debt collector for the Italian mob, until he betrayed them. "They came for him," Darth said. "But they didn't find him." "They found her?" "Your mother." He nodded. "They made me watch." The Nina's breath caught in her throat. "Oh God, I was 8. After that night, I didn't speak for months. My uncle, the man you saw, took me in. He taught me how to fight, how to command, how to kill. He said mercy was weakness." He turned toward her, his eyes distant. "Everything I became was because of that night." Nina reached for his hand, tears slipping down her cheeks. You're not that boy anymore. He shook his head. That boy died with her. No, she whispered. He's still in there. Every time you touch me like I matter, every time you protect me. He's still alive, Darth. You just buried him under the pain. For the first time in years, Darth Vader, the king of shadows, broke down and cried. The next morning, Nina woke to find him gone. On the table lay a note written in his sharp, clean handwriting. Don't follow me. Some ghosts I have to face alone. Her hands trembled as she read it. She knew where he was going. The city, the uncle, the truth. And she also knew that if he faced it alone, she might never see him again. The city hadn't changed. Still breathing smoke and secrets. Darth met his uncle in a cathedral, the same place his mother used to pray. You knew. Darth said quietly. His uncle didn't deny it. She was one of them, boy. Your mother wasn't innocent. What are you talking about? She was the daughter of Don Russo, the man your father betrayed. They spared her life by marrying her to him. You were born from blood and revenge. A Darth's mind spun. You're lying. She loved you. The uncle said softly, but love doesn't erase blood. It binds it tighter. Darth staggered back, his whole identity cracking open. All this time he'd hated the Mafia for killing her. And now he realized she was one of them. He wasn't just their enemy. He was their heir. When Darth returned to the farmhouse, he was silent, different. Nina ran to him, but he didn't touch her. What happened? She whispered. My life is a lie, he said. My mother, my father, everything. I was never meant to escape this world. It's in my blood. Then let me help you change it. You don't understand. He turned, voice cracking. I've killed men for less than what I'm about to tell you. Her voice trembled. Then tell me anyway. He stared at her light, her innocence, and for a second he almost told her everything. But the truth was heavier than words. He only said, if you knew who I really was, you'd run. She stepped closer. Then run with me instead. That night while Darth was gone, Nina wandered through the house. A creaking floorboard revealed a hidden door beneath the rug, locked, but weak. Inside was a small room, dark, cold, lined with photos and files. She froze when she saw them, pictures of herself. Everywhere. From her school days, her old apartment, even one from years ago, before she'd ever met Darth. Her heart stopped. She whispered, oh my God. He'd been watching her long before that night on the street. When he returned, she was waiting with the photos spread across the floor. What is this? She demanded. He froze. Nina, you followed me. You knew me before we even met. You watched me like prey. It wasn't like that. Then tell me what it was. He stepped forward, pained. I saw you once. Years ago. Outside your school. You looked like peace, like everything I'd lost. I told myself I'd protect you from afar. But I couldn't stay away. She backed up, tears spilling. That's not love, Darth. That's obsession. He winced, every word like a wound. You're right, he said softly, but it became love. Real love. She shook her head, unable to look at him. He reached out, slowly, gently. Nina, please. She whispered. I don't even know who you are anymore. He lowered his hand, voice breaking. Neither do I. The truth had shattered everything. Love was now tangled with lies, fear, and betrayal. Darth Vader, the man who ruled an empire, was losing the only person who ever saw the man beneath the monster. And Nina, the woman who believed she could heal him, had just learned that even love has limits. But the story wasn't over, because in the dark something far worse was coming. And this time it wouldn't just break hearts. It would end lives. The farmhouse had become a grave of words. Nina spoke less, Darth drank more. The air between them was heavy, filled with unspoken truths and bruised love. He tried to fix it with gestures, breakfast at dawn, music on the old record player, quiet drives down forgotten roads. But every time she looked at him, she saw those photographs. Her life stolen and stored in secret. One evening, she finally said it. I can't live like this, Darth. I can't keep pretending this is normal. He didn't argue. He only looked at her, his eyes hollow. I know, he said quietly. But I can't lose you, Nina. Not now. Then let me go. The words hit him harder than any bullet. He turned away. You wouldn't survive a week out there. Marco's gone, but his men aren't. I'd rather die free than live behind your walls. He didn't reply, because deep down, he knew she meant it. 2 nights later, Rico's death came back to haunt him. At the docks, one of his men found a body. burned, branded with a mark Darth hadn't seen in years. The Serpent. The Serpent wasn't a gang, it was a syndicate. An international network Marco once worked with. Now, they wanted vengeance. When Darth read the message carved into the body, his blood turned to ice. You took one of ours, we'll take one of yours. He drove home at full speed, heart pounding. The farmhouse door was wide open. "Nina!" he shouted. The house was empty. Her clothes were gone. The rose locket he gave her lay shattered on the floor. The abduction. Nina hadn't planned to run. But when she heard footsteps outside that night, unfamiliar, heavy, deliberate, she knew someone was coming for her. She packed quickly and tried to leave, but the moment she opened the door, a gloved hand covered her mouth. The last thing she saw was a black van waiting at the gate. When she woke, her wrists were tied, her vision blurred. The room smelled of gasoline and blood. A man stood in front of her, tall, with a serpent tattoo curling up his neck. "Miss Hart," he said with a cruel smile. "The boss sends his regards." "Marco's dead," she whispered. The man chuckled. "And yet his debts live on." He crouched down. "Your leverage now. The mighty Darth Vader doesn't bleed. Unless it's for you." When Darth found out, something inside him died. He didn't rage. He didn't scream. He just went quiet. Too quiet. Rico's old contacts, Petrov's remnants, even his own council, all gathered that night at his command. "We burn everything," he said coldly. "Anyone who's ever worn that serpent mark, dead by dawn." His men hesitated. "Boss, if we hit them all at once, it's suicide." He looked up slowly. "Then bring the fire." For 3 days the city blood, warehouses exploded, cars burned, every corner of the underworld whispered his name in fear. But none of it mattered. He still hadn't found her. He barely slept, barely ate. He kept hearing her voice in the silence. "You can't save me from everything, Darth." By the 4th day a call came through. "If you want her alive, come alone." The coordinates were to an abandoned steel factory on the edge of Brooklyn. He loaded his gun, kissed the broken locket and whispered, "Hold on, Angel. I'm coming." The factory was a tomb of rust and shadows. Nina was tied to a chair beneath a flickering light. Her face was bruised, but her eyes, they were still defiant. When Darth walked in, the men around her stiffened. He looked like death. Black coat, cold eyes, gun steady. The leader smirked. "You came alone." Darth's voice was ice. "Let her go, or what?" He shot the nearest man before the question finished. The room erupted. Gunfire, screams, chaos. Darth moved through it like a ghost, ruthless, silent, unstoppable. One by one they fell. When the last man dropped, he ran to Nina, cutting the ropes with shaking hands. "You okay?" She nodded weakly. "I thought you wouldn't come." He touched her face. "There's nowhere I wouldn't go." But before they could move, the leader, bleeding, barely alive, lifted his gun. A single shot rang out. Nina gasped. Darth turned and saw the blood spreading across his chest. "No," she whispered, catching him as he fell. He tried to speak, but blood filled his mouth. She pressed her hand to the wound. "Stay with me, please." He smiled faintly, pain flickering in his eyes. "Looks like I finally paid the price." "Don't say that." He reached for her hand. "You were the only thing that made me human again." "Darth." "No." He coughed, blood staining his lips. "If I don't make it, promise me one thing." "What?" "Don't hate me for who I was." And then his hand fell limp. Nina screamed for help, but the night swallowed her voice. When the police finally arrived, they found her covered in his blood, whispering his name over and over. They said the men were all dead. They said Darth Vader was gone. But when they turned to cover the body, he was gone too. Only the locket lay on the floor, cracked, but still glowing with the faintest trace of gold. The war had ended, but at a terrible cost. Nina had lost the man she loved, or thought she had. The city whispered of his death, but the underworld knew better. Because men like Darth Vader don't die quietly. They wait in the dark. For love, for vengeance, for the next storm. And Nina, broken but breathing, carried both his heart and his ghost. It rained the day they buried him. No body, just a coffin filled with roses and ashes. The color of his empire. Nina stood beneath a black umbrella, her hands trembling around the locket that once held his promise. Reporters whispered. Old allies stayed in the shadows. No one dared approach her. When the priest said, "May his soul rest in peace," Nina almost laughed. Peace was something Darth Vader would never know. 3 months passed. She moved to a quiet town in upstate New York, far from the city that had devoured her heart. She took a teaching job again, children, crayons, laughter. A fragile piece. But sometimes, when she locked up after class, she'd feel it, eyes watching her. Once she turned and saw a man standing by a lamppost, dressed in black. Before she could call out, he vanished. At night, her phone would buzz with blocked calls. Silence on the other end, and then, a single text, "You promised you wouldn't hate me." Her blood ran cold. The message had no number, and the locket around her neck had started to hum. It was nearly midnight when the knock came. 3 slow raps. She froze. "Nina." The voice, deep, low, familiar. Her knees almost gave out. When she opened the door, he stood there, drenched, bleeding, but alive. "Darth," she whispered. He smiled weakly. "You didn't really think I'd die that easily, did you?" Though she slapped him, hard. Then threw her arms around him, sobbing. "I thought you were gone." "I almost was." He touched the scar on his chest. "A friend pulled me out. The serpent wasn't done. I had to disappear before they found you again. You could have told me. If I did, they'd have killed you." He cupped her face. "I watched you from a distance. I made sure you were safe." Her tears turned to anger. "That's not love, Darth. That's control." He flinched, but didn't deny it. For weeks he hid in her small home, bandaged, silent, a ghost of the man she once knew. He no longer smiled. He no longer slept. When she pressed him for answers, he finally said it. "The serpent's leader. He's not dead. Marco was just one piece. There's someone bigger. Someone pulling strings." "Woo." He hesitated. "My father." Nina's breath caught. "Your father? He faked his death when I was a child. Built the syndicate from the ashes of my empire. Everything, every war, every betrayal, it was all his design." She stared at him, horror spreading across her face. "So you've been fighting your own blood?" He nodded. "And now he wants you. To punish me." Strange things began to happen. Her classroom window shattered one night. No one there. A note left on her desk. "You can't hide from heaven, little angel." Darth's face darkened. "That's his handwriting." "Your father's?" He nodded slowly. "He calls himself Lucian, the angel of death. He sees himself as a god cleaning the streets, by burning the sinners." Nina's voice trembled. "Then what does he want with me?" "You're my weakness," Darth said softly. "And gods destroy weakness." They fled again, this time to a cabin near the Canadian border. But this time, the silence between them was heavier. Nina still loved him, but she also feared him. His nightmares grew worse. He'd wake screaming names, sometimes hers, sometimes his father's. She'd hold him until he calmed, but the distance between them grew. One night, he whispered, "If I lose you again, I'll burn the world." She kissed his forehead. "You already came?" And Darth was gone. No note. No trace. The only thing left behind was her locket, and inside it, a chip. When she plugged it into her laptop, a video began to play. It was Darth, bloodied, whispering, "Nina, if you're watching this, I've gone to finish it. Don't follow me. Lucian has to die, even if it means I die with him." Tears blurred her vision. She screamed his name, but the forest gave no answer. Days later, she was taken again, not by the serpent but by someone else. When the blindfold came off, she was in a marble hall filled with gold crosses and burning incense. A man in a white suit sat before her. He looked like Darth, only colder. "Hello, Nina," he said. "I'm Lucian." She froze. "You're his father, indeed. And you're the reason my son turned weak. You call love weakness." He smiled faintly. "Love is an infection. It makes gods bleed." He leaned closer. "But you're special. You can save him or destroy him. Which will it be?" Lucian offered her a deal. Betray Darth or die. He wanted Darth lured into a trap. A meeting where Lucian could end the bloodline himself. She refused at first. But when they showed her the surveillance of Darth's approach, one man against an army, her heart broke. If she didn't warn him, he'd die. If she did, she'd lead Lucian to him. Love was no longer light. It was a weapon. She made her choice. Nina sent the message, a single line that only Darth would recognize: "Meet me where the roses never died." The abandoned garden behind the first farmhouse, their home. Their beginning. She didn't know if she was saving him or killing him. It was dusk when Darth arrived at the old farmhouse. The air smelled of rain and smoke. And the roses he once planted for Nina were still there. Withered but unyielding, he walked through the overgrown path, his black coat brushing against the dead petals. Every step echoed like a heartbeat. He stopped in front of the wooden gate. The same one he'd fixed with her, long ago. And there she was. Nina, standing among the ruins, her white dress fluttering in the wind, eyes full of sorrow. "You came," she whispered. "I always do." She trembled. "You shouldn't have, it's a trap." He smiled faintly. "I know." Behind her, slow footsteps crunched against gravel, and from the shadows emerged Lucien, elegant, cruel, untouched by age. "Father?" Darth said coldly. Lucien smiled. "My son. Or should I say my greatest disappointment." Nina stepped back, caught between them like a tear about to fall. Lucien's voice was calm, almost tender. "I raised you to rule, not to love. You could have been a god." "I never wanted to be a god," Darth said. "I wanted to be free." Lucien laughed softly. "Freedom. That's the lie mortals tell themselves before they kneel." He looked at Nina. "And this teacher made you kneel." "Enough," Darth growled. Lucien's eyes gleamed. "You think love saves you? No, my son. It makes you weak. And weakness must be cut out." He raised his gun and aimed it at Nina. Time slowed. Darth moved, faster than thought, stepping between them. The gun roared. He twisted Lucien's arm, the bullet grazing his shoulder. Nina screamed as both men crashed into the garden, roses exploding underfoot. Lucien's laughter echoed through the chaos. "You're still my boy." Fighting for ghosts. They clashed, fists, blades, fury. The air filled with the scent of gunpowder and blood. Lucien was older, but deadly. Every strike was precise, practiced. Darth was raw rage. Every move born of love and pain. "You think I destroyed you?" Lucien hissed, slashing across his son's arm. "You were broken long before I left you." "You killed my mother!" Darth shouted. Lucien's smile faded. "She was a traitor. She was innocent. She made me weak." Lucien snapped, voice rising. "Just like this girl." He grabbed Nina by the hair, pulling her close. "She will ruin you, too." Something inside Darth snapped. He charged, slamming his father against the garden wall, his blade at Lucien's throat. Lucien looked up, almost proud. "Go ahead. Become what I made you." For a moment, Darth's hands trembled. The son looking at the father. The boy looking at the monster. Then Nina's voice broke through the storm. "Don't, Darth. If you kill him, he wins." Lucien sneered. "Listen to her then, be her pet. Her savior. But remember, you'll always be my creation." Darth's blade pressed deeper. Blood trickled down Lucien's neck. He whispered, "I am nothing like you." And with a sharp twist, he dropped the knife. Lucien blinked, stunned. "You can't even finish it." Darth stepped back. "No. But I can end you another way." He lifted the gun. Not to kill, but to shoot the roses above Lucien's head. The vines collapsed, wrapping around the old man, thorns tearing at his flesh as he fell to his knees. Darth turned away. "Let the garden eat its devil." Lucien tried to rise, coughing blood. "Cower," he spat. Darth looked over his shoulder. "No. Survivor." He took Nina's hand. "We're done here." But as they walked toward the gate, Lucien pulled one last gun from his coat. A final shot rang out. Nina gasped and fell. Darth caught her before she hit the ground. Blood spread across her dress like crimson petals. He turned, furious, feral, and emptied the clip into his father's chest. Lucien fell among the roses, finally silent. Darth dropped beside Nina, trembling. "Stay with me, Angel. Please." She smiled faintly through the pain. "It's okay, it doesn't hurt." "Don't say that." "Don't." Her fingers brushed his cheek. "You're free now, remember that." And then her hand fell. The world went quiet. He held her for hours. Long after the rain stopped, long after the sky turned gold. When he finally stood, his eyes were hollow. He carried her body into the farmhouse, laid her on the bed they once shared, and whispered, "I'll find you in another life." Then he poured gasoline across the floors. A single spark, and the devil's garden burned. Flames consumed the roses, the house, the ghosts. When the police arrived, they found nothing left but ashes, and a single locket gleaming in the ruins. The end of Session 8. The Devil's Garden. The world believed Darth Vader died that night with her. A tragic end to a cursed love. But legends whispered of a man seen near the border months later, his face hidden, a small golden locket in his hand. And those who looked closer swore they could hear him whisper one word to the wind, "Nina." The fire had turned everything to dust. But from the ashes, a single figure had crawled out, burned, broken, but alive. Darth Vader. He remembered the smell of smoke, the scream of wood splitting, the way her hand slipped from his. He remembered dragging himself through the flames until the night swallowed him whole. And then, nothing. Darkness. Silence. When he woke, he was in a monastery on the edge of Vermont. A group of monks had found him unconscious by the river. "You were half dead," the old monk said. "But the fire did not want you." Darth didn't speak for weeks. He just sat by the window, staring at the snow falling outside, hearing her voice in the wind. "You're free now, remember that." The weight of ghosts. He didn't return to the city. He didn't rebuild the empire. He buried the name Darth Vader with her. Now, he was simply David. The monks let him work in the garden, where he planted white roses. Not red. He said he wanted to see something grow without blood. But every night, he woke from the same dream. Nina in the flames, whispering his name. Sometimes she smiled. Sometimes she cried. Sometimes she just stared at him, silent, accusing. He'd wake up screaming, clutching the locket. "Forgive me," he'd whisper. "I couldn't save you." The woman in the rain. Months later, while walking through the nearby town, he saw her. It was raining, just like that first night they met. A woman in a gray coat, holding an umbrella, buying flowers from a small stall. His heart stopped. She turned slightly, her hair, her eyes. It was Nina. He dropped the bag he was carrying and ran. "Nina!" The woman turned, startled, but it wasn't her. Just a stranger, confused and frightened. The flowers drenched, trembling. The flower seller stared. "You okay, mister?" He managed a weak smile. "Yeah, just thought I saw a ghost." That night, one of the monks found an envelope placed outside the gate. No address, no name. Inside was a single photograph. The farmhouse ruins, but untouched by time. And on the back, written in neat handwriting, "She's alive." Darth's hands shook. He looked again. The image was recent. The roses had regrown. He packed his things silently. By dawn, he was gone. The road to New York felt endless. He traveled in silence, memories replaying like ghosts. Every street corner was a battlefield. Every reflection reminded him of who he'd been. When he reached the outskirts of the city, he saw the farmhouse. Rebuilt. Someone had restored it. He walked closer, heart pounding. The garden was alive again, roses blooming under moonlight. And on the porch, humming softly, was a woman in white. The impossible truth. She turned as he stepped forward. Her eyes widened, disbelief, then tears. "Darth?" He froze. "Nina?" It was her. Breathing. Real. He dropped to his knees. "How? I saw you die!" She came closer, trembling. "You did. For a moment I thought I did too. But your men, they came back. They found me barely alive and took me away before the fire spread." He stared at her, shaking. "All this time, I wanted to find you," she whispered. "But everyone said you were gone." He laughed, brokenly. Were ghosts haunting the same world? He reached out, afraid she might vanish. But her hand was warm. "I tried to move on," she said softly. "But I couldn't." He smiled weakly. "I planted roses for you." She laughed through tears. "You always did love your symbolism." They stood there, surrounded by the scent of flowers, the past between them like smoke. There were no promises, no words. Just the quiet understanding that love had survived everything meant to destroy it. Over the next few weeks, they rebuilt what they could. No guns, no empire, no shadows. Just two souls trying to remember how to live, but the ghosts didn't leave easily. Darth still woke from nightmares, and Nina still carried the scars. Once she found him sitting outside, staring at the stars. He said quietly, "Do you think people like us can be forgiven?" She took his hand. "Forgiveness isn't given, Darth. It's earned, and we've already paid enough." As spring came, the roses bloomed brighter than ever. Sometimes, when the wind blew, the petals danced like fire. He'd watch them with a faint smile. "I think she'd like these," he said one morning. Nina looked at him, confused. "She?" He smiled sadly. "My mother." She nodded. "Then maybe she's watching now." He looked up at the sky, gold and red like the flames that once took everything, and whispered, "Then maybe there's still a place for devils in heaven." Love didn't save them. It remade them, scar by scar, breath by breath. They were no longer the monster and the angel, no longer the boss and the teacher. Just Darth and Nina, and sometimes that was enough. But peace never stays forever, because in the shadows of the city, a new symbol began to rise, a serpent reborn, and the world whispered once more, "The devil's son still breathes." The garden was alive again, the house rebuilt. Nina and Darth had found something like peace. Fragile, fleeting, but real. The nights were quiet. No gunfire, no enemies, no shadows. Only the sound of rain and her soft humming as she graded papers. For the first time in his life, Darth felt human. He even smiled. But peace, for men like him, is just the silence before the scream. The return of the serpent, it started with whispers. A symbol painted on walls across New York, a silver serpent coiled around a dagger. A message, a resurrection. When Darth saw the news, his hands clenched. "The serpent's dead," he said quietly. Nina looked at him, fear flickering in her eyes. "You're sure?" He nodded slowly. "I killed the head." She touched his arm gently. "Then maybe this is just someone else. A copy," but deep down Darth knew better. Evil doesn't die, it evolves. One night, he found an envelope on the doorstep. Inside, a single photo. Nina, taken from a distance, the same way it began, and below it the words "Sins never sleep." He burned the photo immediately, but the smell of smoke brought back too many memories. Blood, fire, loss. He turned to her. "We have to leave." "No," she said firmly. "We can't keep running. We either live free, or we never stop being hunted." He looked at her, saw the same strength that once scared him, and for the first time, he didn't argue. 3 nights later, the garden caught fire. He woke to the sound of glass shattering, the scent of gasoline. Outside, shadows moved through the smoke. Men in black, guns drawn. Nina screamed, and he grabbed her hand. "Run." They dashed through the hallway, bullets tearing through the walls. The fire roared, the house collapsing around them. They barely made it out the back door. Into the rain, into the garden where it all began. The devil's last dance, a familiar voice cut through the storm. "Well, well." The lovers who burned the world. Darth turned and froze. It wasn't Lucian. It wasn't Marco. It was Rico, alive, scarred, laughing. "You should have killed me properly," he sneered. "You thought you could bury the serpent with your father. I rebuilt it. Bigger, stronger, and this time, it wears your face." Darth's jaw tightened. "You betrayed me once. I won't give you another chance." Rico raised his gun. "Oh, I'm not here for a chance, boss. I'm here for her." The garden turned into a battlefield once more. Roses, bullets, thunder. Darth fought like a man possessed. Every strike fueled by love and fury. But he was outnumbered, bleeding, surrounded. Rico aimed at Nina. Darth saw it, dove in front of her, and the bullet hit his side. He dropped to his knees, gasping. Rico smirked. "You always were predictable." But Nina wasn't the same woman anymore. Before Rico could fire again, she picked up Darth's gun and shot him. Twice. Rico fell among the roses, eyes wide with disbelief. Nina trembled, the gun still in her hands. Darth looked up at her, half smiling through the pain. Wes the teacher learned something after all. He was fading fast. Blood soaked his shirt, rain washing it away in thin red streams. Nina pressed her hands against the wound. "Stay with me, please. Don't do this again." He smiled faintly. "It's all right, I got what I wanted." "Don't." He touched her face, his voice soft and fading. "To die protecting you, that's not punishment. That's redemption." A tear streamed down her cheeks. "No, we were supposed to live." He tried to speak, but the words turned into a whisper. "Then live for me." His hand fell. His eyes closed. And this time he didn't wake up. The fire finally burned out by morning. The house was gone, the garden in ruins once again. But the roses, somehow, survived. Nina buried him beneath the largest tree, where the roses grew brightest. On his grave, she placed the golden locket. The one he gave her the night their worlds first collided. Then she whispered, "You kept your promise. You found me even at the end." She left the city that day, never to return. But the legend of the mafia boss who fell in love with a teacher lived on. Whispered in bars, painted in alleyways, carved into the underworld's memory. They said he changed everything. They said love made the devil human. In a quiet town by the sea, a woman in her 40s taught children how to read. Her smile was softer now, her voice calmer. One afternoon, a boy brought her a red rose. "Found this by the gate," he said. She froze. The rose was perfect, scarlet, fresh, and tied with a golden thread. The boy tilted his head. "You okay, Miss Nina?" She smiled, tears in her eyes. "Yes, sweetheart. Just remembering someone." Outside, the wind carried a whisper, faint but clear. "Forever, angel." She looked to the horizon, smiled, and whispered back, "Forever." In the end, love didn't conquer death. It became it, eternal, unbreakable, and written in blood and roses. Darth Vader, the mafia boss who feared nothing but love, found his peace. And Nina, the school teacher who taught the devil how to feel, became his heaven. Because in the end, The greatest sin was not killing, it was loving too deeply to ever let go.